We're manipulated all the time. And most of the time we like it. That's why it works.
Ad agencies get the big money, so they
All right.
Don't pay for the express.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right. Right.
Not doesn't if you don't pay for the express lane upgrade.
I was in Disneyland. Is Disneyland the one in California?
Yeah, Disneyland's up.
Yeah, I went to Disneyland in 1958.
Oh wow, Knott's Berry Farm.
They were still building the monorail.
Oh
It
wow.
wasn't complete. And there were still all sorts of orange trees. Everywhere was orange orchards. Yeah, yeah. So just starting. My family took us there, and they brought a teenage babysitter to take care of us too. I mean, I was 10, but the other ones were 1 and 2. But I think they needed one for me too. And she was the daughter of the local police chief. And I remember, and she would babysit for my brothers as we were getting older too. But I was old enough, so I would play catch with her. She had a fastball that had me fearful. She could throw it so hard that it hurt my hand. When George, hi, when it hit. Yeah.
How could I not? I was, you caught me out there, so here I am.
Must be the hot weather. By the way, do we have windows open? Rogu, you open those
Yes,
too?
sir.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's true, but we're gonna need some air too. Because
Sends a pen pencil.
I just put out all sorts of hot air.
No, that was wonderful.
You really don't remember Just going back to, just going back to, some early.
Uh-huh. Well, that's not bad, George. I'm just happy when I stumble on Gretchen's name. I don't want to tell her. My mind is going.
Oh, so I had someone who was asking me questions about the difference between Shimada and the Satipatthana Sutra. And, because in the
Uh-huh.
Satipatthana Sutra, there is no
Right,
meditation on a rock or a feather.
right, right.
And when that all started, I couldn't remember, so I did all this reading, and then I thought, wow, this is really great stuff. And I went to the bathroom, came back, I couldn't remember anything. So it's like I got to read things 6 and 7 times.
That's either a very profound enlightenment story or,
Or
oh, thank
not
you.
going
All
to,
right. Okay. Are we live, Dave? All right. And can you see, is Roberta on? Hi, Roberta. I meant to,
Hey there.
hi, I meant to call you Tuesday night because Kempo sort of got deep into the weeds on your question on, Roberta had a question Tuesday night on the dissolution verse in the White Tara, where it says the wisdom being dissolves to space, the Samaya being dissolves to you, and then you dissolve to your essence, something like that. And I think he's a Kempo, so like he starts getting into the weeds very easily. And in this particular text, I don't really know because it's a blend of two different texts together. So I don't really know the text. I mean, we do it every other Tuesday night and follow what we can, but we've never really had detailed teachings in this particular text. So at any rate, the simple thing is this business of Samaya Sattva and the wisdom, Samaya
Yeah.
being and the
Okay.
Jnana Sattva, the wisdom being. It's a very standard, these sadhanas are sort of like a symphony. They all have kind of recognizable kind of movements and portions within them. And so what do? We start out, they have different degrees of detail, you might say. I mean, for instance, Lama Tarchan's father did a Vajrakalaya practice that was 250 pages long. He did that every day. and he was a great practitioner. He was head of a shedra, like a study center, a dharma center in Amdo region of Tibet. That's where the Dalai Lama was born, in Amdo. And he wanted to practice as a yogi, but he had sort of inherited this position as, you know, this administrative position, although it's practice too, of course. But one night he just jumped out the window and ran away
Wow.
and became this kind of homeless, wandering yogi. And that's how he met Lama Tarchan's mother too. He was begging on a round, and she was there with the family he was begging from. And he just instantly said, "Okay, we're going to be together and have a child." Can you imagine the differences in culture? I mean, in our
Amazing.
culture, if you do that, you're arrested and you're a level one sex offender. But nonetheless, Lama Tarchan's father was a great practitioner, and his practice was 250 pages of Vajrapalaya, practicing that every day. So most of our practices, of course, are much, much shorter for practical reasons. But normally what do we do? Well, in all these practices, you start out by taking refuge, and then you generate motivation, and then this wonderful mantra, Om Svabhava, where you drop your attachment to all ordinary appearances. And this is the experience of emptiness. Now, of course, we don't really necessarily experience it. We're kind of going through the motions, but that's okay. That's the practice. We experience it, but we don't recognize that we experience. That's what's going on. But nonetheless, out of this vast potentiality, nothing you can grasp onto, what arises? The seed syllable. And as Kempo mentioned the other night, and as Gar Rinpoche teaches too, people can get sort of frustrated with this vast mandala that you're trying to visualize. It's okay. You can visualize just the seed syllable. It's all in that. So this is quite remarkable. And somewhere in one of the writings of Kobo Daishi, he's the man who brought tantric Buddhism to Japan from China. He makes a statement about the letter Hung, that in that Hung is the entire universe and all the universes. So it's extremely powerful. But nonetheless, out of that vast emptiness, we arise as the seed syllable. Now, for Vajrakalaya, yes, Hung, but for Tara, it would be Tam, whatever the seed syllable is. And you are that seed syllable. And then always blessings go to all the Buddhas, coming back to the Hung, and then out to the seed syllable to all the sentient beings,
Thingies.
purifying them, transforming them into, members of the mandala, you might say. And then that seed syllable transforms, and you become the particular Buddha of the sadhana. And this can be done in different ways. You can do it part by part by part by part. You can do it like a fish jumping out of water, where just instantaneously you're there. There are different sadhanas, have different styles, but they all work. But importantly, so what are you? You're suddenly there. You're the samaya, the commitment being. You are Tara. So it's not that Tara becomes you, but you become Tara. And there you are, whatever the Buddha is that you're doing. But knowing, this is what's so incredibly skillful about that, because this pure vision, this pure view, our habit is not that. And so we fall out of it again and again and again, and we have doubts even in the midst of the practice. So it's so skillful because why? Commitment being. Because that's not quite as scary as saying, I really am the wisdom Tara. I'm just going to take a half step and I'm going to be committed to be wisdom Tara. And I believe that, I have faith in that. So it gives you kind of an out. It's an easier step into it. And there you are as the commitment being. But of course you immediately then, doubt, I'm not quite really a Buddha, I'm just kind of pretending. So what do? In all the sadhanas, the wisdom being appears. That's the real Tara, right? The one that you can have faith in, because in some way she's not you. I can believe more easily that Gar Rinpoche is a Buddha than I can believe that I'm a Buddha. This is how skillful it is. The whole purpose of the outer Lama is to bring you to the realization of your inner Lama. There's nothing else to it. And of course, that's what pulls the rug out of all sorts of blind faith and stupid kind of cult-like behavior. Because a great teacher will continually sort of grasp that away for you, any kind of stupid kind of devotion. But nonetheless, so now we're there as the Samaya Sattva and the Wisdom Sattva we visualized in front of us in the sky. And what do? They merge. So there's always a place in all these sadhanas where there's a merge. And there's this mantra that goes Za Hung Bam Ho, and there are hand gestures that go with it. But basically, I can't remember it exactly. You're hooking, you're tying, you're binding with a chain, and then you're unifying. So this is what's happening. The Samaya being and the wisdom being merge. And then we go through all of the practices of making offerings, and all of this, of course, it's all bodhicitta. So it's extremely skillful. But in answer to your question the other night, Lama Tarchin would teach it much more simply. There's the wisdom being, there's the commitment being, and the two merge. And that's really all we need to know. You can get into great detail about it, but that's enough, I think, for the visualization. That
That's
work for you?
great. Could you just ask one more question?
Yeah.
There was a point where Kempa was saying that one of the mantras that we recite in the sadhana should be recited silently,
Yeah.
and it was related to maras, and I didn't quite catch the rest.
Malas. Yeah, he was talking about the rosary, the mala, not Mara. Yeah. So what happens is that in that particular practice, there are these two short mantras that are recited silently. In the past, we've done them out loud. We've always done things out loud so that people will learn them. But he's right. And then we started doing one out loud just for people who are sort of starting together and then doing it silently. But there's a point where you're blessing the mala. And so with those two silent, they're only done 7 times, you're sort of cupping the rosary, the mala in your hand, and you're reciting this mantra silently. And then at the end, when that's completed, we blow on the mala, blow on the rosary, and that's giving power, blessing, the blessing of the mantra, but physically and before we start the practice. So that's what's going on there. But yeah, it was mala, not maras.
Thank you. It's a big difference.
I
Really
know.
appreciate the help.
And you make me laugh because I've always found it so entertaining, kind of the cultural and language kind of mistakes that come up with all of this. So for instance, Lama Tarjan, he was an artist and he attracted other, Tibetan artists too. And so he was making a big statue in Spokane, Washington of Yeshe Sogyal. So Yeshe Sogyal is this remarkable, 18-year-old Tibetan girl who, here's Guru Rinpoche, did all these amazing things in Tibet, firmly established the Dharma in Tibet, overcame all the obstacles and earthquakes and all sorts of stuff, and then he's getting set to leave Tibet. And you can imagine, remember, the Tibetans had conquered the capital of China. They had conquered Central Asia. They were very much a warrior. You see it in their dance, this kind of stomp that they do. The same deity, the same tradition really in Nepal doing the sacred dance. It's completely fluid and feminine and beautiful and, more Indian. Whereas the Tibet, it's this martial stomp. So that's what the Tibetans were, right? And in a sense, they still are, but in a spiritual way. So Guru Rinpoche, everybody's gathering around because he's going to leave Tibet, right? And who is he going to appoint as his successor? Yeshe Sogyal. They don't say, but can you imagine the effect that must have been on all these Tibetan guys standing around? And actually, we see that, here too, because look at Guru Rinpoche. Completely traditional. He's not out there running around saying, I'm a feminist or anything like that. None of that's political stuff. He's just completely traditional Tibetan and practitioner. But then Zhiravka, he enthroned Zhiravka. And Lama Tarchin did something similar. He enthroned Dechen Wangmo. So, there are just no rules. That's what I'm saying. On the outer, you see the Tibetans, and yes, they're this, and yes, where'd the women go? But then we have our own experience with Khenpo Sherab. He's training all these nuns in Tibet in the traditional debate, they were kind of excluded from doing. So it's rather amazing stuff. Every time you think you got things pinned down. But at any rate, back to my story. Forgive me. I like to say that I'm Irish. I've got the gift of gab. It can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. So forgive me. But so Lama Tarchan's in Spokane, and he has this giant Yeshe Sogyal statue that the monks and these Tibetan artists are painting on. And of course, their English isn't so hot. And so one of them is painting, and Yeshe Sogyal is naked because she represents, Dzogchen and the direct experience, unmediated, mind to mind. And one of them is painting, and his brush ran out. And so he needed another brush. But he turned around and he said, "Somebody give me a big breast." And everybody burst into laughter. So you made me happy when you thought it was Maras that we were dealing with silently, right? Maras, our instructors. Okay, sorry. Okay, can somebody put duct tape over my mouth now? Yes, Stephanie. Dave has duct tape. I should never be careful what you ask for. You might get it.
Regarding that mantra, Om Swabhava
Yeah.
Shuddha Sarvadharma,
So.
Kempo had us
Huh.
omit that recently
Uh-huh.
amongst some other areas. Does that not matter that we're not saying that? Because it seems rather important that we say that mantra that's sort of like shifting
Yeah. No, I think
our
we should,
perception drastically.
in the White Tara.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was trying to jump over the Torma, right? Because we
Yeah,
weren't
he wanted
actually
us to skip all the Torma stuff, but
Yeah.
it included that
he included the
mantra.
mantra. We'll
I
have
don't
to.
know, I just wondered what you thought about it.
Yeah. Thank you. I think. Well, I'll check with him on that. I check with him on that because again, this isn't one of his practices in a sense. We got it from Gar Rinpoche and all these different monasteries. Not only are the different lineages have their own sort of flavor and particular traditions of sadhanas and that, but even within a lineage, different monasteries have their own traditions and things. Even the torma that they make can be different. Abba was here once, I can't remember, and he looked at one of the torma that we had, and he knew immediately. So, oh yeah, that's he knew. I think partly because of the distances in Tibet, and they didn't have roads basically. So you spend a lot of time in your particular valley, and over 1,000 years. What amazes to me that the differences aren't greater. You know what I mean? I mean, in America, it's like we've seen this with the Protestants, for instance. Reverend Joe Bob gets kind of pissed off at somebody in their church, starts his own church, and the next thing, they got all sorts of different things going on. Lots of differences, like theologically in all sorts of ways. Well, Rime was a movement to tone down any sectarianism that had arisen, and also kind of systematize. I mean, the Nundro practice, traditionally there wasn't a Nundro practice, but it was with the Rime that they came up with this idea of having these quote unquote preliminary. I mean, it's preliminary to the Vajrayana. They're not really preliminary practices at all. But I think in order to make sure people were getting a good foundation in what they needed to do. Yeah. But I'll check on that, Steffi. Thank you. Yeah.
I don't mean to get too nitpicky, but
That's not nitpicky.
it seems like an important mantra
Yeah.
as part of that practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Anything else before we jump into something? I wanted to just give my, appreciation to Zhiravka. The teachings on shamatha and vipassana are, really profound. And what I like about them is that they're so immediately accessible and useful. I mean, you're just dealing with the mind, and you start to see just how remarkable our mind is, and how just we go off the road so just completely instantly. The iron shackles of self-grasping, It is so amazing, and it's so creative. That's the thing. I mean, it's just, it shows you the inherent power that we have. But again, everything seen through this stained lens, you might say. And so that process is so strengthening for people because you actually see it happening. And all the different, those 9 levels. I meant to mention on Sunday that in the beginning of that book that we have, Moonbeams of Mahamudra by Tashitapika Namgyal, this classical Mahamudra text, there is in the frontispiece there this tanka of the 9 stages of shamatha, and it's using an elephant as your mind, some of your mind. And the elephant's wild, he's running around, and then he gets a little bit, through our shamatha practice, he gets lassoed, and you get the monk leading this, and then he's got a monkey on his back, which is our monkey mind, and then a later time there's a rabbit on his back, which are the subtle obscurations where you think that you're kind of zoned out in a way, and you think, oh, this is like good concentration, but actually you're just zoned. The Tibetans have a word for it, that the river is still flowing, but it goes underneath the grasses, so you don't see the river, and you think that you're having, like samadhi, but you're not. It's just a different type of delusion. But then eventually the rabbit goes away, and the elephant starts becoming, changing color, and eventually I can't remember how it goes. The monk is leading the elephant, and the next thing you know, the elephant's leading the monk. I mean, it's just this wonderful image. But what I loved about what Zhiravka was doing is that, I mean, I've read that description. There are many different descriptions of those 9 levels, and they're very textural and very like conclusory, which is good. But at the same time, her explanation was so completely practical and working. And I think very helpful for us because we don't always get the symbolism of the particular text. And so I thought that was just really, really excellent. She's a big resource for us. We're fortunate that she's in Toronto. She's actually close to us, and for a lot of reasons, happy about that. And it's so coincidental and kind of wonderful coincidence that we have the Ukrainians here that we do, because they love her, of course, and know her from Ukraine, and they can be here too. All of that is pretty special. And then this last time when Yarek came with her, I mean, Yarek is a Lama too. He did the 3-year retreat. He spent much time in Kathmandu, and is currently translating into Ukrainian the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. He's a wonderful practitioner. So, at any rate, all of this, good deal for us. All right, so tonight, I wanted to again mention that this is all coming, this Thursday night is all coming from the Dalai Lama's introduction to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And first of all, why? Well, I think so much, when I think of like our bigger community here in Rochester, these practices of how to die are just extremely valuable, because a person isn't necessarily a practitioner, but they're all faced with death. And what you notice so often is that there's no instruction. People are just kind of lost. And of course, that's a danger. The power of the after-death state, the Bardo, because we're no longer kind of like anchored in this material body. So what does that mean? It means the mind is, like they say, 19 times more powerful, but powerful in the sense that it can be blown around. The karmic forces are like a hurricane, and if you don't have that directionality, that confidence in a path, that there's something there that you can even just focus on, even for people who have never focused on anything, except everybody focuses on something, their meal or whatever it is. So we have an inherent kind of shamatha that's there in our life, but the objects differ. And the importance of basically ignoring the distractions. Because if you can think of it like the rays of the sun, infinite rays of the sun all the time shining on us, even on a cloudy day. And so shamatha is this practice which is like taking a magnifying glass. And now all of these disparate rays of light going every which way now are being focused. And because they focus, you can focus it on a spot and make a flame. That flame is wisdom. So it's with that flame, that is vipassana. You're starting to see the flame. You're starting to analyze the flame. You're going deeper and deeper with your experience, abiding more in the flame, in wisdom, our own inherent wisdom. So it's just such a tremendous thing. But for someone who, has never heard of Buddhism or anything, but, death can make them pay attention in a way. And it's not about anyone becoming Buddhist, although that would be a wonderful thing. But to have any kind of instructions for dying is just tremendous, even to the point for the family. This idea that, well, don't be, grabbing their feet, for instance. You want the energy to be thinking up, rising. And so don't be wailing and screaming, because even though they're physically, medically dead, the mind isn't. And it's said that there's like 30 minutes after that when you're very sensitive. I mean, you don't know you're dead. And all this, your loved ones yelling and screaming and wailing, it's upsetting. It agitates the mind. And the important thing is a calm mind, which is the practice of shamatha. So whatever we can do to ensure a calm mind dying is positive for people. They may know nothing about meditation, certainly nothing about the Buddha Dharma, but it's just a tremendous benefit at a very pregnant moment. But then further, if there are teachings of the arising of the clear light, and then it's kind of not fracturing, but like a rainbow, suddenly all these colors and Buddhas appearing and all of this, and this whole system kind of then, degenerating down. When we don't have recognition, it gets grosser and grosser, you might say. So first, instead of the pure rainbow appearances and peaceful and beautiful, and you want that, although you might be scared of it, then come the wrathful deities. Of course, that scares everyone. Then, without recognition there, the Bardo experiences, which are, more like worldly level of understanding, but again, completely unanchored and therefore vulnerable. And the lights arising, and we're attracted to the dull lights. They don't seem so scary, but they lead to the six realms. Whereas the bright lights, which is our Buddha nature, it's just a little bit too bright. We don't want to go there. It's too exposing or too scary somehow. So to have these basic teachings are of such inestimable value. But they naturally involve the tantric teachings. And this is what's so remarkable to me, because here we have, the Buddha taught the Tantra in his historical time, but not so much. They didn't have to. They had a very stable kind of, and spiritually advanced, you might say, society. Not that they didn't have all the craziness that we have, and certainly their own struggles. I mean, the Buddha's cousin tried to assassinate him twice. I mean, they're still human beings. We're still living in an impure land, an impure realm. But nonetheless, these tantric teachings are said to be especially for times of degeneration. And this was what Guru Rinpoche said. So they're exceptionally useful for us and important to know. And what I love about it is that even in these great moments of our life, birth and then living, of course, death, and then the Bardo, they're completely in correspondence, you might say, with the three bodies of the Buddha. Birth, Nirmanakaya, this physical existence, the rising of the clear light, the Dharmakaya, and then the Bardo, the Sambhogakaya, all these subtle forms we can relate to, which is wonderful, but we can't grab onto them just inherently. They're just like will-o'-the-wisps. So this is totally remarkable. This is what the Tantra is. We're transforming those experiences into the three bodies of the Buddha. Remarkable, remarkable method. And it really comes down to method. We can have a spark, we can have this understanding, we can understand conceptually and sort of feel it too, the vastness of Buddha mind and the complete non-duality of it. There's just no room for any kind of afflictive emotion. There's no room for any kind of attachment. There's no room for any kind of sectarianism. None of this stuff. There's no conceptuality. And yet, there it is. The fact that we have these methods is, to me, well, just remarkable. I came across this quotation from good old, Professor Kanze. Now, Kanze didn't know the Tantra. He had some teachings from Tibetan lamas, very high Tibetan lamas, and so I'm sure he had exposure to it. But in his writings in that, he was always writing specifically about the conventional Mahayana. And he said, it's just kind of a mystery how in our industrial civilization, how little interest there is in the methods by which happiness is gained. He said there are many reasons for this, I suppose, but he said, we come across people every day who are desperately looking for some sort of refuge from the horrors and the sufferings of our particular time. He's writing this in 1964, much like maybe Tahiti was to Paul Gauguin. This place you could go and suddenly, oh, it's natural, it's pure, without all the whatever industrial war of France and Germany at that time. And yet, so few are interested in he says, the subtleties and the soaring beauties of the Mahayana. It's the nature of samsara. It's just the nature of samsara. It shows you how strong these clingings are. And for us, the wonderful thing is that we have the sufficient faith to attempt to look at your mind. And then you see how powerful these distractions are. I remember the first time that I meditated, 5 minutes, and I was facing a wall in my apartment in Minneapolis, and oh my goodness. I am not a creative person. And yet what I noticed was the effect of the attempt to avoid any kind of concentration. And I realized after 5 minutes, instead of sitting with your eyes down, I suddenly realized that I had turned my head to the right somehow, like that possessed girl in The Exorcist. Yeah, I didn't go that far. but this involuntary, in 5 minutes time, I was trying to run away from that concentration right there. And then, ridiculous kind of visions. I'm not someone who has visions, but these ridiculous kind of arguments with my mother-in-law. It was like very revealing. This was just like mind out of control. And you try to experience some peace for 5 minutes. And it's just like, I don't know if you guys saw that video recently. There was some rodeo happening somewhere in the States. This giant bull that jumps over the fence into the crowd. Right? That's my mind. So you see your mind for what it is, instead of these delusions that we live with, in a subtle way. We know, right? Our own vulnerability, of course. But we cover it up with all the stuff that are all defensive kind of things, I think the psychologist would say. Really, really remarkable. But now, for the first time, we're on the path. We're actually looking at reality as it is. That's just so amazing, how valuable. And of course, as you start to see the workings of your own mind, you understand that that's other people's minds too. We're all in the same boat. This is the great equality of the Buddha Dharma. I mean, this is something that's hard for us to kind of, feel in our gut. It's like this tremendous equality, but at the same time, there's this hierarchy. Sometimes people get all worked up about, the seeming hierarchy, even in an organization, with the lamas. There was someone here years ago came to the Amitabha Foundation then, and he was there on a Sunday morning, and after he took me aside and he said, "Okay, this seems pretty good to me, and but I want to tell you something." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I'm not bound down to nobody." I said, "Okay, no one's saying you have to." But the hierarchy creates a problem for people. It seems like somebody else is special, whatever. But again, the whole purpose of the outer Lama is that it's the fastest way to discover the inner Lama. That's the whole point of it. And when one has sufficient confidence like that, and it's just doing what you have to do, trying to generate bodhicitta, doing the best we can with everything, you end up having experiences, whether physically or not, with your outer Lama, your inner Lama in the form of an outer Lama. And the complete down to earthness of it, the complete lack of, bullshit. It's like disarming, at least to me, because especially in our culture, everybody's selling something. Everybody's selling something. And so we naturally evolve or condition ourselves, with that kind of defensiveness. Even if it's something that we're excited about, we drop our defensiveness and go too far in the other direction. We become enthusiasts and we drop our critical eye. I mean, it can happen. Of course, there's a middle way that many people are doing just fine. But my point is that we live in a culture where the outer societal thing is someone selling you something all the time, whether it's physical, whether it's an idea, whether it's a movement, whatever it is, they're selling you on something. So to meet someone who's not selling you anything, and truly, at least my experience, loves you more than you love yourself, that is completely disarming because there's no concept for it. I can speak like this with concepts, but that's not it. And it's not like you have to be like me playing around with all these ideas and that. You can have no knowledge of any of this and yet have that kind of interaction with, and it doesn't have to be something like you can even write home about. It's just something about the quality of the experience, just the image. I mean, again, the Tantra is reality itself. It's liberation by thought, liberation by taste, liberation by touch, liberation by sight, liberation by hearing. What's the other one? Feeling. All of these things. It's beyond wonderful. So, we're totally qualified. We're human beings. We're exceptionally qualified because we lack the extreme suffering. Not all human beings, it's true. Some are in extreme suffering. They really don't have the perfect human situation. But for us, we can check those 18 different factors if you want to get into the weeds of it. But what does that do? That gives you confidence. You can go through all 18 of these and say, actually I have that. Man, my girlfriend just dumped me and I just lost my job and everybody in the world is telling me I'm a loser and not things aren't going so good, but somehow I still have these 18. My goodness. So it's a baseline that is totally positive. And then, of course, we're fortunate because the tradition has survived. So you have support in so many different ways. And you never know, but all these things work together. So, not next weekend, but the following, when Rinchen Dorje comes, Drupal. And if you're like me, you don't really know anything about any of this, but all of a sudden there's someone who's done a 12-year retreat. And I'm thinking to myself, I know how I struggle through 9 days of Yamataka. I know how I struggle through 2 hours of teachings. You can't tell me, how do you do 12 years? So that's good because there's a question there. There's an openness. There's a recognition of our not knowing. And of course, the great not knowing with capital N and capital K, that is realization. So we're hooked in from the beginning. We don't realize how tremendously auspicious it is. But slowly, slowly, one starts gaining confidence, different levels of faith. At one point, it's just simply you see these positive qualities in someone else, typically a teacher, and you'd like to kind of develop those. So what do I have to do? It's like very simple. What do I have to do? And we find it our way too. I mean, reading, all the reading we do, questioning, the analyzing, the searching. But it's, again, it's like learning how to play tennis. You have the desire, I want to be able to play tennis. And so every kind of filters into your life where, you're looking at other tennis players, you're taking some lessons, you're reading a book. There's this kind of path, this kind of a unity. It's given meaning to what you're doing. And the Dharma, of course, is that in spades. So,
First exposure to Zen was in the inner game of tennis.
the inner game of tennis. I remember that book.
Timothy Galloway.
Uh-huh.
This is the Zen tennis.
The Zen of Tennis. I remember that book, right?
The inner game of tennis.
The inner game of tennis, Keen is saying, yeah.
And he told this story, which I think you know, was I was going. They told him to go into a room.
We'll get a mic for Keen.
Yeah, my dad wasn't the best tennis player, but he was the best reader of tennis. But he loved that book, and that book tells this story. And I think you might know this story. It's about this guy that goes into a room, and he's meditating for like a week on a bull, and then they asked him after about a week to come out. He's like, I can't get out. The horns are too big.
Yeah, that's a Tibetan story.
Is that?
Yeah, visualizing yourself as a bull, right?
Yeah.
She couldn't get out of the room. The entrance didn't accommodate her horns.
Right. Yeah. He tells that story in the inner game of time. A funny story about that is he's like, well, if you want to learn how to serve, just go take an old racket, go out into a field, and just throw it. So you're gonna
That's
learn.
the motion, he said.
Well,
Cool.
Yeah, because it's very similar to
Yeah.
throwing a baseball.
Yeah, very
But,
cool.
Rather than throwing a baseball because we're learning tennis, just
Yeah.
take an old racket and just start throwing it out,
Yeah.
and that's how you can.
So it's the advantage we have because, I mean, if you think about 1,000 years of this, I mean, think how many different personalities, life stories, life systems. I mean, times of war, times of peace, times of, solid and like good societal government and governance, and then times when everything was corrupt. All of that, it's come through all of that. And I'm always amazed, just the down-to-earth practicality, which is so helpful once one is on the path. It says in the Lotus Sutra, bodhisattvas will spring up out of the earth to help you. It's stuff that you can't plan, you can't manipulate, it's just our nature. So, pretty wonderful. So at any rate, that's the reason for the Tantra, because for many people, the Tantra seems so esoteric. I mean, why are we doing this? Let's just do loving kindness and compassion. Of course. There's no Tantra without the mind of the Buddha, which is bodhicitta. It's such an important point. So traditionally, in Tibet, at least for the Geluks, they like study and practice the conventional, the path of perfection for, I can't remember what it is. It's like, 18 years if they were doing the classic study in one of the great monastic monasteries like Sera. And then you start learning the Tantra. So they really, really learn the sutra thoroughly. And that's for us too. Now the newer traditions, especially the Nyingma, they say, well, yeah, you have to really, really have the right motivation for the Tantra. But at the same time, life is very short, it's dangerous, we've got to take some risks. So they tend to jump into the Tantra more easily. And that's been our experience here. Why do we even have these tantric teachings? Ordinarily in Tibet, you would generally not. The general population would not. So we've been very fortunate in that way. But of course, that gives you a bigger responsibility too, because you're able to do more harm, misleading other people and to ourselves too, somehow feeding our grasping instead of using it to destroy our grasping. But that's why empowerment, that's why samayas, that's why the teachings that aren't in the text, that's why the lung, the oral blessing that allows you, empowers you to say the mantra. So you're in this stream of practitioners going back to the Buddha. It's real. It's real. Even if you're a course type like me and you don't see that, you don't necessarily experience these things in that way, then, you have the experience of practicing it for 20 years. And then maybe there's some sort of insight and you realize, oh my goodness, this was really true. So that's okay. We all have different paths. And Giraffe said something wonderful this weekend. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, it's not like someone's higher, someone's lower, someone's on the path. So, we all experience things in a different way. We have this remarkable uniqueness, each one of us, from our own karmas. But that's why 84,000 different teachings, because we've got at least 84,000 different moods. We have at least 84,000 different situations. And therefore, there's something in there for each one of us at that particular moment. It's not like you pick one thing and that's all you do, although that works too. But at the same time, it's so skillful. It's like you go to your doctor, there's just all these different medicines up his or her sleeve because she doesn't know what she's going to run into with the particular dis-ease of the patient. So too for us. It's really true. The Buddha is the great physician, the Dharma is the medicine, and the Sangha are the nurses. You have to have nurses helping each other. So at any rate, that's why we do something here that, in some ways raises the risk of people sort of being, greedy or something about the Tantra and thinking that they can avoid bodhicitta. I mean, there are people who think like that, believe it or not. We don't seem to have that here, fortunately. But the reason that we present the full range of teachings in a little humble center like ours is because this is the great tradition that has, through which thousands of people have realized and tremendous benefit has come. And it's not necessarily something that you can put on a resume, something that you can even write about in a book. We don't know the effect we have on others. The momentary peace that someone feels. I mean, all these things have karmic effects and the benefits. Dalai Lama said once, I heard a teaching, he gave a teaching to Tibetans, I think at the time that he was here in Buffalo. So this was like a recording. But nonetheless, he talked about a memory he had of himself being, a little boy on the edge of a big crowd of people who were listening to Buddha Shakyamuni teaching. And it's like that kind of thing, the cause, the effect can be being born as the Dalai Lama, someone who has this incredible opportunity for training and then realization. So we don't know the effects. But on the other hand, because it starts with that refuge and then develops into this positive motivation, we can have trust that there's nothing harmful there. We can experience all sorts of things in our own purification. But really, I mean, what's the alternative? I joke, but you've seen that bumper sticker, he who dies with the most stuff wins. That's how silly it is, really. Kind of our unstated motivations as opposed to this pure motivation. And this pure motivation, like holding up the mirror, we see our impurity again and again and again. That's not to be discouraging, we're seeing things as they are, and that's wisdom. That's the discriminating mind of Buddha Amitabha, and that's good. Okay, so I've just sort of gone off talking tonight, sorry. First, any questions, anything on anybody's mind?
The Bardo teachings.
Yeah.
just say one thing quick? It's only that it reminds me of this topic that I was talking about with one of my first Indian friends. I guess he was kind of like my Indian tribe, right? He was like my college.
Is the mic on?
Hello? Yeah.
There it is, good.
So,
Yeah, hold it closer to you, yeah.
oh, okay. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay. And so he was a Brahmin. So, he would always say, Keen, when you die, whatever you think of, that's what you come back as is in the next lifetime. But these Bardo teachings reminded me that I would always challenge him. I would be, well, what if I think about nothing? And so the Brahmins think that nobody does that.
wow,
And I'm not saying that when we're doing the Bardo teachings, we're thinking about nothing.
Yeah.
We're thinking about light, but I mean, to a Brahmin, that's nothing.
uh-huh,
You know what I mean? It's like, because I don't think it's really good for us to be thinking about nothing. We have to be focusing on the lights, but it just made me think that, challenging that and then thinking about nothing was leading me, because I wasn't even thinking about Buddhism at that time. But
yeah,
there's just these little sprinkles
uh-huh,
of the path that, and you don't know you're on the path, but then, then all of a sudden you're here.
all of a sudden you're here, yes you go,
Sorry about that.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, jeez.
Thank you. Two things. The first thing is that I was really kind of enthusiastic about having gone through last weekend's retreat, and I got out on, I think it was Monday morning, and I walked the dog like I always do, early, 6:30, 7 o'clock, I don't know. I'm going from tree to tree, like Sharavka said. I'm going to tree. I'm gonna really concentrate on the next tree. I've got the tree, and there's a fox, and that fox is running across the way, and I'm done.
Right.
The fox took me way away. Is the dog okay? Is that fox gonna come near me? Self-grasping totally, and I just needed to share that because I was like, okay, just keep going, next tree.
She got that from Rinpoche,
Yeah.
His father taught him that.
Yeah, I think it's in the book too.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's right. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's right.
I had read it, but yeah. And when she said it, it just, it kind of triggered me back to the book and,
Yeah, yeah.
and all that. So
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, I'm going tree to tree. I got the fox.
But
so,
I'm wondering, the fox to me seems auspicious. I'm wondering, one
Right.
of your previous mothers
yeah, maybe
popped up.
Maybe so. I noticed myself grasping it. Like, is the dog
Right,
okay?
right.
Like the dog weighs 8 pounds. Okay. If you don't know the dog. Anyway, the second thing is I would love for you to just talk a little bit for people who might not know about Chakrasamvara. I mean, some of us have had the
Yeah.
empowerment and have done the retreat, but like it's important to the Drikung Kagyu, and
Yeah.
it's a pivotal Yidam deity. So
Yeah, it's
you
the
could-
central Yidam deity in all the new schools. So for instance, you've heard about Mount Kailash, for instance. Kailash is the throne of Chakrasamvara. He lives on the top, so to speak. Yeah, right. It could well be. I mean, sure, there are many things that I don't know. But yeah, why? Well, again, the whole Buddhist world takes refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And you can actually think of it, I do sometimes, as a horizontal axis. So, Buddha and the outer meaning of Buddha, the man that lived, but it also means our own true nature in the inner way, and Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But there's also this vertical axis, which is the Lama, the Guru, the Yidam, and then the Dakinis, Dakas, and Dakinis. So those are the inner meaning of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So think about that. The Yidam, I can't remember the name in Sanskrit, but the indwelling deity, that's what it means, is the Dharma. But you see all of a sudden that the Dharma is something, it's not reading a book. I mean, the Dharma is this, good grief, we are the Dharma. How mind-boggling is that? And so the Yidam, when you do, the 3-year retreat, they're different 3-year retreats. They're organized different ways. But you do, after the Nundro, after doing all the preliminaries, you do practice of the Lama, Guru Yoga, the the Yidam practice, and then the Dakini practices. So all these Buddhas have the same essence, but Chakrasamvara was the Yidam of Tilopa. So it goes way back where this was like the central Yidam deity. So it's especially auspicious, you might say. It's central. Now, most of us, are not completing Nundro, are not going to be doing that kind of practice, but it's a great blessing just to have contact with it in your mind stream. And Drupan obviously is qualified to teach it. So it's special because it's one, it kind of unites all these different traditions in an outer kind of way. But more than that, it's the incredible symbolism of it and the reality of it. This Yidam practice, it produces cities. It produces the Lama is the source of blessings. The Yidam is the source of cities or powers. The greatest power is realization. But it also, side benefits are, clairvoyance and clairaudience and all these kinds of special kind of enhanced kind of sensual powers, mental powers, clarity. And the Dakinis and the Dakas are the sacred activity. And so this is really remarkable because now suddenly you can do activity as part of your practice, not just silent, meditation. Someone said, for instance, that in the perfection of wisdom, the conventional teachings, the path of the perfections, it's like we're going inner, keeping distractions away, doing all this practice and everything, but this concentration into the nature of mind, inner, and then there can be a realization. But it comes from this kind of focus. But Chogyam Trungpa said, once that initial insight is there, that's, again, the perfection of wisdom. But Mahamudra is a great relaxing. Suddenly you can relax in that. So different methods at different times, so to speak. Another way that it's spoken of is Sherab and Yeshe. So Sherab is prajna, is the path of the perfections. And what are we doing? We're looking up to the perfections. We're going higher, 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 higher. But in the practice of Yeshe, which is the Tantra, Jnana, practice of wisdom, the inherent wisdom practicing from the get-go, it's like you're looking down. So again, there are many, many different metaphors and ways of approaching all of this to help us get a handle on it and so that we can have confidence in just the pure experience of it. But nonetheless, the Yidams are very important in that way because they have this kind of like a foot in both worlds. There's form involved, and yet at the same time, it's the formless aspect. There's less attachment to the form because it's not material, it's mind generated. Already we're in a better place because we know that we're working with the mind. And now we can work with it in an extremely skillful way. I mean, you're going to like that moment of creation and harnessing that, you might say, for the purpose of liberating beings through this remarkable. So we have this twofold kind of, not even mentioning the quote unquote lower tantras, just talking about the highest yoga tantra, we have this remarkable path of generating ourselves as the Buddha. And then working, once we have that kind of understanding, working with all the veins and channels and all the incredible methods within this Buddha body. And then, of course, dissolving it all into the nature of mind. So it's just exceptionally skillful. But for Chakrasamvara, this is a tremendous blessing to get the empowerment on that. Yeah.
Is it the forearm Chakrasamvara or the 12-arm?
I don't know. I think he's doing 12-arm. I think so. Yeah. Yeah, it's a new text. We just printed it. I haven't looked at it yet. It's hiding in the office. We separated from the donuts and Keen's birthday cake. Hot off the press. Yeah. Yeah. Where is that mic?
So, turn it on. There. There.
There you go.
Okay.
You're good.
So, I know in a lot of our prayers, we say, we pray, may I not have an untimely death, may I not have an unnatural death. Okay, so most of you know I've worked as a chaplain, so I'll come back to that, untimely, unnatural. Bardo prayers, as said by lay practitioners and their effectiveness, versus Bardo prayers, as said, then we have the monks say, we mention names, and we might right away to have the monks. Working with patients, it's a complicated, my mother-in-law is dying, and my wife is with her. And so there are some questions I have about how to prepare my wife, actually. And they all know that I've taken the ultimate Genyan vow, so lay monk, et cetera, yada, yada, yada. But I also get caught up between, there are the sort of ceremonies that we can do that are culled from just something, different aspects of the Bardo prayers, which we pray for these people, person, may they not, they're going to go through this, stay with them, higher days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And most instructions for those prayers are usually for a month, right? To do them every night for a month. But in helping prepare a loved one's mind
Yes.
for the Bardo can be
Yes.
a sticky thing.
Yes.
And I guess my instant reaction is not to go there.
Yes.
And then the it's sort of like any other prayer. Well, is the ceremony for us or is it for them?
Right.
And so there's the reality of my beliefs that they will go through the Bardo.
Right.
But if they've been raised, Presbyterian or Methodist,
Yeah.
You don't bring no stinking Bardo prayers here. So there is that. And then I wanted, so I have a question about that.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to talk about an experience I had in the hospital and
Yeah.
how that might affect. So I think I mentioned this to you, but I went up to award the woman, they called for a chaplain. The nurses called for a chaplain because there's this woman who was very distraught. And I get up there, and pardon this extreme verbiage, foul language. So I get up there, and there's this Thai woman, she's screaming, "You killed my fucking mother, you killed her, you
Right.
killed her." Evidently she had allowed for a procedure that, and then her mother wound up dead.
Ouch.
And so she's cursing at the staff, and she's cursing, and they're saying, "Wouldn't you like to see the chaplains here?" "I don't want no fucking
Right.
chaplain." I don't.
Right.
So I go to the young lady who's next in the bed next to her, who's totally like freaked out and had never seen a death. So I work with her, etc. I go away for about an hour. I come back, this woman's still screaming, "I don't want no," and she's
Yeah.
with her mother. And then they finally said, "Well, the chaplain's here again, wouldn't you like, I don't need no fucking chaplain, I'm a Buddhist."
Right.
And I'm like, boing! So it's like, You can't say you're a Buddhist chaplain. I mean,
Right.
even though, of course,
Right.
the Catholics.
I'm
go
so
with-
happy you
with,
asked.
With their collars,
Right.
you know, you instantly know what they are.
Right.
But at any rate, so I say I'm a Buddhist,
Right.
and silence. All of a sudden, just silence. And then they kill my fucking.
Oh, yeah, right.
It gets lower. And I said, would you like me to say prayers with your mother? So I did Tara and I did Avalokitesvara. And that calmed her down and then et cetera. And so then I said, would you like me to do Bardo? You know, I had Bardo prayers. She said, no, my uncle's a monk. So couple of things. By her acting this way with her mother, didn't she just totally wreck the whole Bardo process?
Depends on her mother. And the prayers are for us too. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so, as you can see, I have many sort of questions inserted. The efficacy of prayer from lay people, and what kind of ceremony, the preparation for loved ones that we want to give to prepare them for death. I do a death meditation all the time, so but then this whole idea of what constitutes a natural or unnatural death, and how that affects our journey through the Bardo.
Well, traditionally they say the unnatural death is like an automobile accident.
Right, an
Sudden.
automobile.
Sudden. So
But
you're not
cancer,
prepared.
Cancer is not. But is cancer an unnatural death?
No.
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 It's a natural
No.
death.
It's a natural death.
Even for like a little one.
Yeah, you're going through a process. Even though it's statistically rare, it's still a natural death.
Well, I did pediatric oncology, so
Oh, wow.
not really.
Yeah. Well, no, I know, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, most of us think of that as being
Yeah.
rare. But and the important thing, bottom line, is the calmness of the mind of the dying person.
Right.
And then also the calmness of the mind of the family around.
Family around.
But as far as it doesn't have to be a monk, because no one knows. It has to do with the merit of the practitioner. And you just don't know. Again, the Vimalakirti Sutra, where Buddha knows Vimalakirti is this enlightened layperson. And as for training some of his monks, he says, why don't you guys over and, go debate with Vimalakirti? Because they're all a little bit arrogant, because they're the monks. And Vimalakirti, of course, keeps pulling the rug out from him all over the place, including the thundering silence of Vimalakirti. They didn't know how to handle his profound realization. So fundamentally, yes, if it's making any kind of agitation, we're going to do this ritual, you don't do it. The fundamental thing is calming the mind of that person. But again, as far as the power, we never know, because you don't know the degree of realization of the practitioner. The outer form of them could be the trash man coming in. You don't know he's a bodhisattva. He's not wearing any Buddhist clothes, nothing, and yet he has that profound blessing. Nobody knows. And there's a story in Japan of a very simple woman who was just chanting Amitabha's name all the time. And I mean, basically no results, but she's doing this her whole life. And then one night she had traveled away from home and she was going back through a scary kind of forest, and she was chanting Amitabha, Amitabha, Amitabha. And suddenly a storm and rain starting, and she's starting to run, Amitabha, Amitabha. And then suddenly there's this massive crack of thunder and lightning, and Amitabha, and that was her realization. But that doesn't mean that we have to generate some huge fearful emotion and overpower the dying person. I'm shouting Amitabha at you. But I'm just saying the power, the clarity of mind, you don't know. Because you can have someone, since all of us have Buddha nature, we can surprise ourselves in a moment. It can not even be recognized as realization, because it just is what it is. But we can have the experience of having a tremendously agitated mind And for some reason, there's a moment of pure devotion, not fabricated. And suddenly, all that agitation is not there, or you see it and it's so tiny. So calming the mind, that's the biggest thing with all of them. And it's a wonderful thing. What a wonderful story. How
Yeah,
she
no,
immediately, just the conceptual label, a Buddhist here with me, bingo. Yeah, my fucking mother.
like for 3 months, there were 2 Buddhists that I
Right.
got to be with. But thank you for that. And Vimla Kirti also has a wonderful teaching on the Bodhisattva path. It's wonderfully archaic language. It's really,
Wow, I'll have to look at that. I
yeah,
don't know that.
It's,
Yeah,
it's something
Yeah.
else. But in looking at doing more chaplaining, I've already been in a lot of cases where there's a lot of death, and I kind of it feels weird to have to do something in a clandestine way.
uh-huh.
Whereas, I get to do Christian prayers also
Yeah.
for people, so they turn the machine off, I go on, and
Yeah.
I can't do last rites, I'm not a
Yeah.
priest, but I can say prayers,
Yeah.
Christian prayers.
Yeah,
But if they don't say anything, I feel like I'm sneaking in, Om Mani Padme Hum." And at some point, I'm just wanting the Buddhist canon to kind of permeate the bottom rung of society enough for people to understand what actually is being given,
yeah, yeah.
rather than
And that's a wonderful aspiration. And yet sometimes, like the Buddhist meaning, the real meaning, the realization meaning comes through Christian words.
Right.
I mean, I think, Jesus on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's karma.
Right.
That's the statement of samsara in just one sentence. And also his statement, the kingdom of heaven is within. Good grief. They didn't understand him, but I sometimes feel like we do.
No, I've
I
had the
can't tell the
experience
Christians that.
where I walked into a room once, and the guy looked at me and he said, "Well, if you believe like I do that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior and came here to save our souls," I said, "Sure."
Yeah,
I pulled up a chair. I just sat down
No problem.
because I just figured it wasn't about me,
Yeah. There you go.
and this was going to calm his mind. But
It's wonderful.
interesting.
All right.
Interesting.
All right. Anything else tonight from anyone? Otherwise, we'll do the dedication. See if I can find a dedication in here. Probably not. Just 'cause, as usual, I'm not prepared. And that's okay. All right. We share the merit from this evening with all motherly sentient beings, each and every one. In the infinity of space, the infinity of beings, each and every one of them has benefited us. And we therefore naturally have gratitude towards these beings. We see how they suffer. They suffered because of the sacrifices they made for us, and even the worldly things they did to provide us worldly benefits, believing in the ultimate reality of this material world. So we are on the path to save them, and never will we stop. Svaha. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, Zoomer, still working on that camera.
Thanks, Dave.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Zoom.